white, and I'm gonna kill you.
She's not a Virgo?
No.
Okay.
She's a Taurus. No, she's amazing, man.
That's cool.
She has taught me a lot about myself.
Yeah, totally. That's important.
She's taught me I am.
You guys are good.
What are we good to do?
Whatever you want.
Um,
Just put my computer downstairs.
Sweet. You want us to wait for you to come back up, or it doesn't matter?
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
my wife says she should have come. Maybe there'll be next time.
100%.
Yeah, we love that.
I'd love to get to know her.
Yeah, she's awesome. I think you guys will have a great conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're good sound-wise, Jordan?
Yeah.
Okay. I had a starting place.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
You had an idea. There was a plan?
I mean, no, there's not a plan.
Okay,
It's
cool.
not a plan, but I have, like, and I was thinking about when we bumped into each other at the bank.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the first time I'd seen you.
Oh.
Well, no, I'd seen you DJing at the thing in Palm Springs
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
where you were DJing and I was the only one dancing.
Yeah, totally.
Which
Yeah,
was
for
awesome.
sure. It was really funny.
And then I bumped into the bank, and that was a really odd day for me for a variety of reasons. I mean, that the young woman that passed away, what was her name?
Oh, I don't remember, but I know who you're talking about.
I think
My wife knew her, right?
sponsored her or had worked with her.
I think my wife did.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Your wife did.
Yeah, totally.
And
Isn't that crazy that people just pass away and then they're kind of forgotten? Time passes and it's interesting.
Not only do I think it's crazy, I try to have a practice, which is why I was asking, do you remember her name, of when it comes up to say their name out loud, because I don't think they go away.
Right.
And so it's like, just acknowledging that. But that day, 20 minutes before the bank, I had been speaking to my friend who was her therapist.
Right.
And she's like, I'm not having a good day. This girl passed. And then I went and saw you. And then I bumped into you at the bank. And then you knew her.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to the homies, and the homie knew her.
Oh, I remember you telling me this.
And then it was just a deep day. I was like, what is going on? But as an opening, I remember going, Kaylani said, oh, I'm having a hard time. And I went, oh, man, I'm so sorry. And you went, it's okay.
Sarah. That's who it
Sarah.
was.
Hi, Sarah.
Fucking Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
With the crows. I love Sarah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
she
you
was
go.
a really beautiful being. Special. Yeah.
Yeah. And you had said, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered how I received that and how I received you when you said that, which was acceptance is not quite the word, because I think we use that word closer to like tolerance,
Totally.
but it was more like, one, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here with my lady and she's going through it, but I'm okay. I mean, I got that, like, I'm okay.
Totally.
But also sort of, well, yeah, you tell me. I have my thoughts about how I received it, but I received it and it left an impression on me.
Yeah, I think, well, she was at a detox that I was working with my wife at, and that's how we met her. And I think that, and this is just my idea, if you're not doing the work, and I think a lot of people don't know what the work is, I don't expect you to live. So when you die, it's not a surprise to me. That's really my thoughts on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And when you said, I'm okay,
Mm-hmm.
and you were sort of referencing your state, I get it. So it's connected to an understanding that people die when they don't do the work. What are you saying?
Yeah, that's a piece of it. And also, I'm very like moment to moment. So really the only thing that's real is just what's in front of me.
Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah.
else really exists.
Yeah.
This is the truth.
Yeah.
So I'm more of a person that puts like 100% of my effort into whoever's in front of me and whatever situation is there.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of like missing or thinking of things outside of my moment,
Yeah. Yeah. That was kind of how I took it.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, here we are. Here's the is
Totally.
that's happening.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's cool, man.
Yeah, for sure.
I appreciate that. It actually inspired me. I went to, I think often all of us, but definitely me, I'll respond to the expectations of others and have a certain, not in every situation, but in situations, particularly around death, there's sort of like a decorum, right? A certain persona that people put on around death to
Totally.
make sure that everybody knows that you're acknowledging that a bad thing happened, and that might or might not align with how you actually feel.
Right.
And so when you did that, it left an impression on me, and I went to my great aunt's funeral 3 weeks ago. My Aunt Dottie, hi Dottie. And I was in a good mood, and she lived a good life. And so I just allowed myself to be in a good mood. And
Totally.
people asked how I was doing. I was like, I'm good. And one of the daughters was having a hard time, and instead of like going, oh, you know, and putting on the decorum, I was like, no, it's, you know, I'm okay. I mean, I didn't say it's good, but I was like just able to be me in it.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the other daughters was in acceptance, my cousins, and I was thinking of you. I was like, it just like kind of motivated me to be a little more real, a little more real and caring, but real.
Totally. I mean, those for me are like opportunities to be of service to other people because I'm good, you know? I definitely never put on a face, or I don't really respect the decorum of any sort of system anymore.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's just not my way. And oftentimes I don't go to memorials because I just don't.
Yeah.
You know, it's not really interested in that. I've got more use for people that are living around me than showing up for that, you know? But I also don't have like a weird thing around death. We were kind of talking about this before it started, where I did kind of like have that fear around death. And at around 41 years old, I had my first anxiety attack, I guess, which was like not related to a thought.
Yeah.
It was just a feeling that came over me. And I didn't understand why, because like I'm a really chilled dude. And all of a sudden, like I started getting like sweaty and everything started getting really white, and I started getting lightheaded, and I didn't know what was going on. And then the story started coming in around the feeling, which is like, this is it for you. You're going to die of an aneurysm. You know what I mean?
It was like a panic attack.
Yeah, it was like a weird thing, you know? Well, my
Yeah.
dad died like that. He died of an aneurysm.
Whoa.
And my adopted dad, you know, like had heart issues from the time he was 40. So like,
Sure.
mortality like really hit me at 40.
Yeah.
So by
sure.
41, I'm like full. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm smiling because as a Jew, I have those monthly, you know.
Right.
Like fucking definitely dying right now.
Totally. Yeah. 100%. 100%. But I was working with this dude who had like a bunch of time sober, and he used to go to Nepal all the time, and he used to speak to these Nepalese monks. And I told him about my experience, and he kind of told me about this ideology that some of them have, where it's like they believe that our spirits travel like all these different dimensions to inhabit our bodies, to go through like, I guess what you would consider the chaotic struggle of life, just to experience death, because death is literally the biggest, most beautiful gift ever. And it just
wow, that's interesting.
changed my
Is it
perspective.
like Tibetan Buddhist practice?
Yeah.
Or they train to?
It's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah, totally.
Was it Jogchen? Do you remember what lineage was?
I have no idea. Yeah.
That's
So it changed my perspective. And then when I came back from Bali, for some reason, this 1 week, I worked with 3 different people that had near-death experiences. And they all like shared a very similar kind of experience, which also, you know, made me just realize like, oh, death's not bad.
Yeah.
The only reason I feel like I'm here from like a desire space is because I want to spend as much time with my wife as I possibly can.
Wow.
But in terms of like purpose,
From a desire
I've
space,
done
that's
everything.
cool,
I've done everything I needed to do on this earth. I don't need to be here anymore.
man. Whoa.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting you bring that up. I think I've had sort of one train of thought that I've been working on for a long time, and it keeps kind of coming back. You know, coming from experience. And I was speaking at this psychedelic conference last week, and I was talking about spiritual awakening and 12-step and psychedelics and how we think about spiritual awakening. And kind of the way I was framing it is I'm like, look, we are embodied organisms that have memory. And in fact, reality has memory. Meaning reality is leaving a trace. That's how we have what feels like a solid material world. It's because there's some cohesive memory that's happening that allows for stability. However you want to think about that. And so we're balancing living in the creative moment, like you talk about. Like I'm just kind of here right now. Right. And there are people that are more here and less here.
Totally.
Right.
100%.
But there's this creative happening that's happening, maybe eternally, I don't know. And then there's our memory, which we need to function, right? And whether it's unconscious memory that I know that a doorknob is a doorknob so I can open the door, or whether I'm thinking about something that happened in the past, there's this kind of memory aspect. And I think about how in psychology, much of what people get trapped in when they're trapped in addiction or in what we think of as pathology or depression or anxiety, it has to do with memory creating projection in the world. And I get trapped in my projection.
Totally.
And I don't have access to the creative moment. So that's like on an individual level. And then on...
But the problem is about, like, the memory gets skewed by self-centeredness.
Yeah, it's projection. Yeah, it's a projection. It's,
Yeah.
It's being projected through your schema.
Right.
Right. So it's not accurate.
No, definitely not.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. We live in it. And then, so I was thinking about that individual, and then I was thinking, okay, cultures and politics have ideologies,
Right.
where a living idea becomes kind of a dead, constrained,
Can you give me an example?
cultural agreement. Any fundamentalist tradition, right? Where something, I'll give an easy example. Civil rights movement in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
At a certain point, that was a real liberation movement that was in the hearts and minds of people striving to get a law changed.
Right.
Okay. And I think there was a living spirit to that. And there was a living spirit when Martin Luther King, got up and said, here's what's going on, or any number of people. And then I think there was a living spirit that came up around gay rights and around looking at how we treat people with different sexual orientations and gender orientations in the last 20 years. And then all the woke stuff, to me, is just pointing out that somewhere that living spirit got disconnected and turned into an ideology that was unreflective and people actually weren't really connected to. It kind of took on a life of its own, like a skin.
Right.
And that's why people kind of backed up, and why it was confusing is because it went from a living reality that we were co-creating to a really strong story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the problem with a lot of that stuff is like, they're like celebrating individualism and separatism instead of like creating unity, and I think that's
that's
the
great.
issue.
That's
You
a
know
great
what I mean?
perspective. Yeah.
We're going the wrong way, and I understand like why that's created, because like if someone feels marginalized, they want respect or whatever, and I get that they want to be seen, but at the same time, it's like there's like to be seen is only the fucking fluff that's blowing off the tip of the iceberg. It's really about like we're all just human beings. You know what I mean?
Sure. To give an example, I don't argue. Speaking about like the individual piece. So a lot of kind of lay philosophy people blame Rene Descartes for the revolution of modern science and kind of individualism, thinking about us as kind of, separate from each other.
I don't know anything about Rene Descartes.
Doesn't even matter.
Doesn't? I like the history though. It's kind of interesting.
Okay, well, I'll give you a little bit.
Yeah, give me something.
So he was a mathematician.
I want to learn some shit.
He was the guy to quote, "I think, therefore I am." So
Right.
he started a philosophy in the meditations where he's like, what can we say about the world that's true? And he's
Right.
like, well, I'm having an experience. And he puts that, I think, therefore I am, obviously in Latin or something like that. Anyways, nowadays, people look back at him and they demonize him. And they say, you're responsible for individualism and for, kind of how science has co-opted reality in some way. So he gets very blamed in kind of a mythic, interesting
But I think
way.
that's true though. I think therefore I am. There's like truth to that.
So that's my point. So my point is, when he had the inspiration, it might have been that people felt so embedded in their society. They were so embedded in the collective that it was suffocating. And so he said, the individual, you know what I mean, in some sense.
Totally.
And so then it wasn't, you know what I mean? So like, I guess for me, when I think about the constraint that I'm talking about, and I want to tie it back to death, I'm talking about when ideas become disconnected from a living reality.
Totally.
Just like I talked about with decorum around death, when I wasn't really feeling that way. And so, but I feel like I'm supposed to feel that way, right? And so I'm actually disconnected from myself in some sense. So whether that's on the individual end or the collective end, it can happen both ways, where I'm disconnected from the living, authentic spirit of what's happening with me and around me and with us. But the larger point was, connecting it back to death, was one of the thoughts I've been really digging in on, is materialism as a philosophy, which means that the world is primarily material and everything grows out of material from a random fashion from the Big Bang, and nothing has meaning beyond, right? It's materialism.
Maybe, yeah, totally.
Is dead.
Right.
I mean, it died when Einstein and them discovered quantum mechanics, and we realized that the universe was information and energy, and that what we mean by material and hard matter is actually not the case. So scientifically, that idea died, but in reality, it didn't sink into the population. And right now, I think there is a blooming of spirit, and the death of materialism is hitting mainstream, and we're starting to go, wait a minute, what's happening here in the world? Because we thought, we were taught by our science teachers and our teachers that they knew what the world is. That was a lie. It was a story.
Totally.
That had some evidence, but now everything's being turned upside down. Physics, astrology, mathematics is not a complete set. Even how we think about biology is not what it was. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so things like NDEs, you know what I mean? Things like near-death experiences, ideas of soul, ideas of spirit, the relevance of our religious traditions and the wisdom that exists there, not that it's perfect wisdom. Things like UAPs, you know, hey, what's actually like, are there other beings and realms? All that stuff, I think, is coming up to the forefront as materialism kind of dies out.
Totally. Yeah, that stuff's really cool. Yeah, I can, like the same thing with like, I think Jesus was misinterpreted when Jesus was saying, I'm the Son of God. I don't think that Jesus meant that like he was the Son of God. We're all God.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you think that he meant that? And that's a real.
This
question.
is just
yeah, it's a real question. I mean, listen. I guess I'll ask personally. Do you think that there was something different about Jesus in particular?
Well, sometimes I question whether or not Jesus actually existed. I look at Jesus as more of like a story with symbolism.
Yeah.
I think Jesus is the embodiment of selflessness and unconditional love. So if he did exist, I guess that's what would make him different. And it sounds like a dude who just dedicated his life to that practice. But I don't think that that's something that other people are barred from experiencing. I think everybody can have that practice. I just think that we're lost.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know that that's what the practice is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
So, he was a human. He was a human with selfless practice, as much as we all are humans.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think he just recognized that, like, everybody has the light of God within them. And the light of God is just selflessness, you know, and the battle is just between the self and the selflessness, over identifying with self, having this self-centered sensitivities, like all that stuff. But I think everybody has the capacity to be God. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I was talking about a book yesterday. It was a guy named Eric Fromm. He was a cool sociologist, and he was kind of a pop writer too, actually. But he has a book. He was studying to be a rabbi, and then he went to psychology and sociology. And he's got a book called And You Shall Be As Gods, which is his interpretation of the Torah.
Okay.
And it's beautiful. And his interpretation is the goal of all of us is to become like God. And this is the whole point of existence.
Totally.
Yeah, it's really deep.
I love that.
Yeah.
What made you pick that up?
Great question. How did I get Eric Fromm? I don't think it was the first book I read by him. I think the first book I read by him was called The Insecurity of Freedom.
That's an interesting title.
It's a good title.
Yeah.
Oh, no, actually, it was called Escape from Freedom.
Escape from Freedom.
Abraham Joshua Heschel had a book called Insecurity of Freedom. They both came out within 10 years of each other, so there seems to be a theme. And it was coming out of Nazi Germany.
Okay.
And the premise of both books was that human beings, it was kind of existential philosophy or psychology, that human beings are actually afraid of freedom.
Yeah.
And so we look to give our power over to something.
Totally.
Other people, drugs, ideologies.
Money, systems, yeah, all kinds of material bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
freedom's actually, if you can't be with it, the idea of it can be terrifying. The reality of being a mysterious being existing, in some sense.
Well, and also
can be
you have to
scary.
take responsibility for your life in its entirety if you don't give it over to other people, places, and things. I think that's what people are afraid of, to consider that like your entire life is sculpted based on the perception that you choose, the feelings that you choose. That's hard for
It's
people.
a lot of pressure.
Yeah, totally. But there is freedom on the other side of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when you say that. I think of there's a line by Heschel, the other guy I was mentioning, who says, which with each choice we either accelerate or retard the coming of redemption. Like as humans, right? From this sort of his Judaic, view of reality. So each choice we're either bringing the universe closer to redemption, where we're all more like God,
Right.
or we're going further away.
Totally.
And from one perspective, it's beautiful, and from another perspective, one could be crushed by the idea of it, right?
They could be.
Yeah.
I think it's because people overcomplicate it. I don't think God is that elusive. I mean, God is whatever you think it is, whether you think it exists or not. I think we are, in essence, God, because whether or not we believe in God is our choice, and what kind of God we choose to believe in, if we choose to believe in God, is our choice. Another word for God is creator. We're essentially creating the existence of God. So I believe that there's almost two ideas of God. There's the one that exists in all of us, which is the divine purpose.
Yeah.
And then there's the divine purpose that's universal, that I do think is more powerful than us. And I do think that that's benign and unconditionally loving. And there's so much evidence of its existence, not only in my life, but in so many lives, in the world. I see it all the time, So I think the benefit of believing in that is just mitigating anxiety and depression and all the sort of mental health stuff that we see cropping up today.
Yeah, I think what comes up for me, and I probably definitely could be accused of overcomplicating things for sure. When I hear that is around one, the ultimately the not knowing. We know what we know, but ultimately we don't know everything, or at least we don't have access to everything.
Right.
So there's a mystery that seems inherent in reality, which I in many ways appreciate.
Yeah, totally. Me too. Life is just happening. It's
happening.
a series of events. That's
happening.
it.
It's definitely happening.
Yeah. But we get to choose how we want to see every event. It's not one way or the other.
Yeah.
I don't think it's good or bad or, against us or for us, but we get to place what we want to on it. Some people might refer to that as like magical thinking, but if I live in magical thinking for the rest of my life and I live the rest 50 years of my life being happy and joyous and free,
Sure.
and I die, and there's nothing, who gives a fuck?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's magical thinking. I think our capacity to frame our reality and behave in our reality within the constraints of the truth, whatever that might be.
Well, the truth is simple.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a what. I think it's a when.
Tell me. Oh, the truth is what's going on.
This is it.
Now.
This is the only thing that we know. That's it. In terms of truth.
Agreed.
There's,
Agreed.
you know what I mean?
Agreed.
Everything else outside of this moment, any thought would be a story.
So granted.
Right.
And within the constraints of that, right? So any way that I frame or behave within my reality, within the constraints of the truth, what's going on right now, to the good, to build the good, right? We should always be doing. That's not magical thinking.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
That's sort of like our North Star.
Right. 100%.
Yeah.
And I think, for me, North Star is more aligned with divine purpose. My North Star is how can I be the blessing to this moment, which allows me to experience the truth because I have an intention for every moment. But I think this is what kind of like what you were talking about before about, our memories skewing our perception of the truth.
Yeah.
And that being a problem because we project them. And obviously we have a different experience. It's not necessarily rooted in truth. And I think this is where honesty and truth are no longer synonymous, where I can honestly be feeling anxious, honestly be feeling depressed, but it's really not rooted in what's actually happening,
Yeah, I would concur.
Concurring?
I would concur. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. All right, so motivation of like when I picked up the film, I was like, yeah, let's chat.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's get into it. I love it. This is what they're here for.
So it was interesting. It was. Well, I can't remember exactly what was happening. I think I told you at the time, but I basically haven't been on social media for a long time.
Yeah.
And I started because we're doing
Good for you,
these
bro.
videos. Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still try not to really be on it, but I just got back on it, and so I don't look at people's profile. You know what I mean? And you popped up. And I was preparing for this conference to speak about recovery and psychedelics, and it was a video, and I think the main points of it were a question around people utilizing plant medicine coming into recovery communities, and around the people that you had experienced that were utilizing plant medicine and were in recovery. Looking for spiritual growth, and a question around if you're looking for spirit. I don't remember exactly how you framed it, but something like, if you're looking for spiritual growth, or you have spiritual growth, why do you need plant medicine? What do you think? Or something like this.
Totally.
Is that about right?
Yeah.
And my initial response was
Fuck this guy. Just kidding.
no, not at all. Not at all.
No, I'm playing.
I mean, it wasn't not fuck this guy.
Yeah,
but
totally.
It was to be honest, it was. I don't think he
Please.
knows what he's talking about.
Yeah,
I don't
okay.
think he's thought this out well.
I love that.
Was my initial response, and more so, and I really like this guy. I mean, I don't know if I know you well enough to say I love you, but I love you as a human. You know, we're still getting to know each other well.
Totally.
So it was like, and I really like him, and so there was both of those, and so there was like, oh, we should have a conversation. You know, we should have a conversation,
For sure.
And then with me, I was coming in and I was thinking, okay, like I want to learn, because I can be accused of, like, you know, being overly.
Really?
Oh man, yeah, big time.
Okay.
I've been accused of that, and so I think for me, I was coming in and I was like, no, I want to like learn with each other, or question, or explore, in some sense.
Totally.
And so here we are, and so I think my question was sort of what motivated it for you, the statement, like what are the experiences you have, et cetera, and what are your thoughts about it in general around psychedelics and recovery, and how do you, thoughts, feelings, whatever,
Okay. My thoughts are this. Jordan, you ready, buddy? You crawling on your knees, getting weird over there? Yeah, okay. I definitely did my fair share of use of psychedelics, you know what I mean, a lot. And I definitely had experiences where I got great downloads from the universe. I think the most profound yet simplest one is that we're all connected and we're all one. I think a lot of people come to that realization. I think that the recovery community is really fucked, to be quite honest with you. I think the definition of what it means to be an addict or alcoholic, same thing, in terms of abnormal reaction, has been lost, which means that there's a lot of people in 12-step fellowship that don't suffer from that.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that psychedelics could potentially be useful in a detox space for those specific kinds of people with abnormal reaction. I think that...
Like the algae of the body, you mean, kind of in some
yeah,
sense.
totally.
Yeah, got it.
And I do believe that exists. I know that's a big debate out there, whether it exists or not.
You don't have to sell me on it. I think
Yeah.
I was raised by an alcoholic.
Yeah, okay, cool. So you know that shit exists, right?
Yeah, phenotypes and all that shit.
Yeah, so, I mean, some people, that's the big argument. So there are some people that I think require abstinence, and I have, because, and this, my opinion is not coming from my experience.
Yeah.
It's coming from the experience of like working with 16,000 people in book sessions and having like these conversations with them,
Great.
And that's just in the last 15 years. So, and then everything before that, all the people that I worked with, there's some people that can't fuck with psychedelics.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then there's also people, because of different mental health issues that may not be addicts or alcoholics, probably shouldn't be fucking with psychedelics.
100%. Yeah.
So my opinion is for the real addict or real alcoholic, the real abnormal reaction, outside of the detox space, and in detox space purely to open up their mind, kind of like Bill Wilson, belladonna, that whole thing.
Sure, yeah.
I think it could be useful there. But the people who are proposing it as like something to do down the line to heal the trauma because you've healed out of your addiction, which I don't think if you actually have addiction, you've healed out of it.
Yeah, sure.
That whole thing gets messy.
Yeah.
And I think that people are looking for the easy way out. And I'm going to say this about therapy in general.
Yeah.
Because I kind of look at the same thing, you know, like it's all yielding spiritual awakenings. But
It's always, I missed one word in there.
Yielding spiritual awakenings, but I don't think
right.
that it yields a spiritual experience. I think there's a difference between those things. I think an awakening is like an epiphany, a revelation. It's a hit. It's an impactful moment.
Sure. Yeah.
Versus like a spiritual experience,
100%.
which would be the integration of that into your life through a daily practice.
Got it. Yeah.
So
Great.
if you do like come to this realization through your ayahuasca experience or whatever, that we're all connected, like there's purpose, blah, blah, blah. And then you like live that through whether it be a 12-step process or some sort of altruistic practice.
Yeah.
Like I think that's going to be the most beneficial thing. But I think people are relying more on the experience to carry them rather than actually, you know, practicing anything. That's my thoughts on it.
Got it. So I hear you saying as a potential catalyst for the person who has the allergy of the body in a detox setting to help, almost like Bill, with the awakening portion.
Yeah.
Could be helpful.
Yeah. Maybe.
Right.
I don't think that's
maybe.
like
Not,
blanket.
We should,
everyone should be. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and let's get super clear. My and I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I mean, I'll say over 10 years, and you know, hundreds of thousands of thoughts and books.
Right.
So I want to say up front, it's a nuanced conversation.
Very.
And I posted something, or Jordan posted something yesterday, where I talked about risks of psychedelics.
I saw that. Yeah, it was great.
And there was a person commenting on it who I work with a lot, and I'm, you know, don't do psychedelics. Right. My comment to my buddy, who texted me like, I don't think so.
It's not for you.
That's my opinion. I could be wrong about that, but that's my opinion. So I have very nuanced views about it. I agree with parts of what you said, you know, for sure. And I think that there's so many layers to the conversation. Like there is one layer of the conversation, which is like who, how, when, maybe. Okay. You know, who might this be beneficial for?
Right.
At what point in their trajectory might that make sense? Right?
Totally. I think also giving sort of a realistic perspective on what it is, though. And this is the thing. It's like, it's not the solution. Like the solution.
For sure.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem is it's like being
100%.
kind of proposed as that.
100%. I think that where my defensiveness comes in, actually I would say where the rationalization that I have after defensiveness when I'm sometimes talking to people.
Totally.
Because there's a defensiveness and then there's a rationalization that I have. No, for me, I'm saying, I'll tell you.
Yeah, please.
Because I think that like I had this thought of, you know, we probably have 100 million people a week drinking to excess.
For sure.
Right. And that's sort of acceptable in society in some sense. And we probably have several million people that are harming each other, engaging in incredibly risky behavior, quite a few thousand people dying every week from alcohol.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, that's a sort of a culturally normative risk that everybody's agreed we do as people, to whatever degree we've all agreed that we do.
Totally.
the risks of psilocybin, which I would say if somebody asked, but let's say psilocybin's I think it's probably the most popular psychedelic that's going on right now in California. The risk of psilocybin, to me, not even comparable. Like, you can't even get close to saying what the risks of psilocybin are. And in fact, we don't even know what it would be like to live in a culture that accepted certain forms of psilocybin as
not
normative
tracking
over a
it
period of time. We're not
either.
tracking it.
Yeah, totally.
But we know it ain't like alcohol. I mean, I'm very confident in saying the difference of the risks associated with...
Well, hold on,
Yeah,
because
please,
remember, like they said the same thing about weed. Like I was brought up to think that like weed is the fucking great thing, and like alcohol is what destroys people. But look at all the people that are going to psychosis over weed right now.
For
It's
sure,
like,
I agree about
it's
that
a
with
wild.
weed, but I don't agree about that with psilocybin.
I don't know yet. We'll
I'll say
see.
from the research that I've done,
Right.
even risks of psychosis tremendously higher with marijuana than it is psilocybin. And I'm not advocating that everybody should do psilocybin. I guess what I want to say is like some of my defensiveness comes in from the risks that we accept, including the risk of people being too ashamed in recovery who are really struggling, or people who are really stuck in trying to get sober, feeling like there aren't people in the recovery community that go, hey, yeah, fuck, you've been drinking, you've been shooting dope, like psilocybin, like if you think that could help, you know what I mean? So there's a weird kind of stigma that to me is stranger than with people with cocaine, or like somebody comes in and is like, I'm fucking doing cocaine. You're like, welcome back, come into the meeting. Somebody comes in, I'm not saying you, but somebody comes in and like, I'm doing something like psilocybin and recovery. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here?
I don't think that like that. I mean, I haven't seen that yet. What I do see is like people taking psilocybin and then being like, I'm sober.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's kind of like...
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I think that the only reason that would be an issue in a substance-specific 12-step fellowship is because that fellowship requires abstinence.
Well, no.
Well, a substance-specific
12-step?
Yeah.
No, 12-step just requires a desire to stop drinking.
No, I'm talking about like any 12-step fellowship that's substance specific, so cocaine, weed, alcohol, whatever. You to be a part of the fellowship, it's just a desire to stop drinking, but to stop drinking, to stop using.
What's culturally normative and reinforced within most meetings is this is an abstinence-based experience, but
for a reason though.
100%.
Totally.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
But it is important to make the distinction to say that actually is not what the program says, interestingly, in terms of to be a member.
Right, totally.
Yeah, so
100%.
I could potentially be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and be on Prozac.
For sure.
I could be a member of Alcoholics and be microdosing.
Absolutely.
And I'm not a person, by the way, like where I get itchy with people is when they, and you're not doing this, I'm not saying you, but when I've experienced people dictating what they think AA should be like. And so I've heard people, I got in a fight with a probably mutual friend of ours. It wasn't even a fight. I was like, what are you talking about?
I want to know who it is, Doc.
I'll tell you after.
Oh, damn. Okay,
but
cool.
he'll know who he is. He says, so I come out of a meeting and he says to me, people from treatment centers shouldn't be able to come to meetings. He's a very popular guy. He runs a big group in AA. And he goes, they're ruining the culture of AA, treatment programs in West LA. And I just looked at him and I said, let me just ask you a question, bro. Like, who is in charge of the spirit of Alcoholics Anonymous?
Right, totally.
Like, is it you?
Yeah, totally.
And so for me, I'm not even getting to a layer of conversation. Plant medicine is a spiritual medicine. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it's a plant intelligence from another planet. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why it becomes popular at the times it becomes popular. Was it popular amongst the Egyptians? Was it popular amongst the Greeks? Why is it popular in the 60s? It's becoming popular.
Been, forever.
I mean, it's interesting.
Totally.
And when somebody in their soul feels called, you know what I mean, towards that, and it's somebody in recovery, I'm like, okay. Now, if somebody asks me my opinion, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
How do you think I should do it? Do you? I mean, I have an opinion. If I know you, I might have an opinion on it. Do I think that there should be AA groups that don't do that aren't more fundamentalist and kind of reject that? No, I'm cool. Pacific group wants to exist, and this group wants to exist, and they're kind of more orthodox, and that's their deal. Like, I like those groups. I think that those are really important for some people. But I think that there also needs to be people in the recovery community that say, oh, I get it. This is your tribe? Cool. Come on in. This is our tribe. This is how we do it. Are there going to be major problems with it? I think everything we think that's going to go wrong with psychedelics is going to go wrong.
For sure.
I think everything we think is going to go wrong is going to go wrong. So I would never sit here and claim that I think nothing's going to go wrong. I think everything's going to go wrong.
I mean, I don't believe in right or wrong.
But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's at its like fledgling stages, so for sure. Yeah, I don't really adhere to or subscribe to the culture of AA fellowship at all.
Yeah.
I'm
that's
kind of
interesting. Yeah, you do your own kind of selfless practice.
Yeah, I mean,
Which is dope.
it happens to be out of the big book in
Yeah.
terms of like maintaining my sobriety. But I think that a lot of the stuff that happens within the fellowship is just a bunch of bullshit, to be quite honest
I agree
with
with
you. You know, and I don't give a fuck if people are drinking or using, or I don't care if people are using like
I dig it.
psychedelics at all. Like none of that matters. I think what I am protective over is like the people that need to be abstinent because
100%.
of an abnormal reaction.
100%.
That's the only thing. And I think that
And jury's out. I would say jury's out
on what?
on, like, for me, a really interesting question. Like, there's something, I'll admit, this is like a visioning thing that has been kind of like, I don't know, man, happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my dad used to eat mushrooms in the 60s and read the dictionary. I'm from Berkeley, California. The first time I ate mushrooms,
funny.
I was like 12 years old.
Right.
And I ate way too much because I stole little bits from my friends, and I was being too greedy, and I think it changed the course of my reality. And when I got sober, I went, oh, I think some people do this in the back of my mind, but there is something different about that for me. That was my experience, and I knew that. But I didn't have a plan. I wasn't like, I'm going to do psychedelics
That's
or whatever.
funny. That is my thought too.
But I do have a vision that I think is really intriguing, and I'll just lay it out as an example. Some vision of something like this. I am so curious because I actually love AA.
Mm-hmm.
I fucking love it.
What do you mean by that when you say you love AA? Like the community or the program?
The program.
Okay. Well, what is the program to you?
What's that?
What is the program to you?
The program to me is for people that have alcoholics originally.
No, but what is the actual program? Like you say you love the program.
Work the steps, have a spiritual awakening, work with others.
What does that mean to you, work the steps?
Like culturally normative, or what?
No.
What is it?
Like what does it actually mean? Like in original intention, like what is working the steps?
Acknowledge God. Inventory. I mean, primary. I mean, I won't go through each of them because that's too long, and we both know them, right? But the core of it.
Yeah, I have a different idea of it. That's why I'm asking.
Okay. So what I mean is working the steps through the book.
Okay.
To have a spiritual awakening. And
do you think the steps are in the text, or the steps are in the practice of how
the practice of living?
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And that practice is rooted in
Agreed.
what?
That's a very general question. You have to be more specific.
I mean,
when you say that practice is rooted in, do you mean like historically, philosophically, spiritually?
Well, I mean, we're talking about the essence of the 12 steps. What is the essence of that practice? It's rooted in what?
I mean, I would say it's rooted in getting out of self and
Totally.
working with others.
That's it.
100%.
Right? So,
Yeah.
like, I think the common misconception is that the steps have been conceptualized rather than worked. I don't think
I agree with you.
most people aren't working the
I
steps.
agree with you. They're not practicing, they're not living it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Not
agree.
living it comes from passing it on
Yeah, I agree with you.
from the get-go.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And I think, like, because that's not happening,
Mm-hmm.
people are essentially white-knuckling it and not getting what is being promised to them
100%.
through the process.
100%.
And
Which,
that's
but that is a process that we both have been through. Where
right.
there were periods of time where, to whatever degree, you or I was attempting to be an awakening and be in service, and lost somehow in it until you bumped into whoever you bumped into or whatever you bumped into, until you had the internal state that you had, that you went, oh, selfless practice. Got it, practicing it.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is that I was sort of, my practice of the 12 steps was like a fellowship-based
Yep, okay.
thing. like, and what I mean by that
Yeah.
is like, you know, get a sponsor, go to a certain amount of meetings, call your sponsor a certain time of day. My step work was typically writing, reading, and then talking to a sponsor. If the sponsor thought that I'd done a thorough enough job,
Sure.
move on to the next step.
Yeah.
A lot of emphasis on the inventory,
Yeah.
a lot of emphasis on the amends,
Yeah.
and then reworking the steps once I got done,
Yep.
and
That's-
sort of
that was my
casually raising
process.
my hand at
Yeah.
meetings when
Yeah.
they made the sponsorship announcement, hoping
Yeah.
someone came to me.
Sure.
All that was bullshit. I tried
Yeah.
to kill myself twice
Yeah.
in my first 9.5 years
Yeah.
doing it like that.
Yeah.
It wasn't until it was introduced to me that all that was bullshit,
Mm-hmm.
that like all that writing and shit that I was
Mhm.
doing was like
Mm-hmm.
busy work. And I'm not talking about inventory, but inventory, even without selfless practice,
Yeah.
doesn't mean shit, because
Yeah.
self-knowledge doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And basically all we're learning in inventory is that it's the symptoms of self that are creating unmanageability in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Writing about it's not going to help me. Selfless practice will.
Mhm.
So step one was really like, okay, cool. I'm passing pages of the book. That's my
Mhm.
step one. Passing
Mhm.
pages of step two,
Mhm.
because, you know, coming to believe that a selfless practice is what's restoring me to sanity. The sanity is the inability to be present.
Yeah.
Like all that stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So it just changed my perspective on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess the thing that I think about that I'm saying is that I would say the reality of my
You found me, yeah?
experience is we have a set of defenses as humans.
What do you mean?
We have a set of psychological defenses.
Okay.
Right. Whatever they.
I
might
love
be.
you so much, dude. I'm really enjoying this.
Are we having a good time?
I fucking love you, bro.
I mean, do I need to, like, when I say psychological defenses, are we agreeing in general on what I mean by that?
Yeah, I look at that as I just look at it as self-centered thinking. But go ahead. Same thing.
Well, let's go slow. I like that. Yes, I can feel threatened, and in feeling threatened, I try to protect an image or an idea of
Totally.
myself.
Yeah.
Right.
I call
So-
that pride.
What'd you say? Called pride.
Pride.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So we have pride. We have sets of defenses to
Totally.
maintain boundaries, whatever. And I think of the process of the steps, whether it's the writing, or whether it's the meditating, whether it's the whatever, as attempting to work into soften defenses in some sense, so that I can become comfortable in moving towards radical change in some sense. In general, that's how I think about it. And so for different people, there are different things, different experiences that create a sense of safety where they can soften. For some people, life just beats them to hell. So they're
Totally.
completely softened. For other people who have strong intellectual defenses, for instance, the writing and the thinking and being able to think it through and have some understanding, if they can do that well with somebody else, can be really helpful. For some people, it's just being around people. Like we had a guy come into my program, and he's just been isolated in his dad's basement for 10 years, and just like being around people, man, put a smile. Like he's like, oh, I'm
Totally.
by myself. You know what I mean? So
That could have gone the other way too, though.
it could have gone the other way.
You know what I mean?
Well, and it did 2 weeks later. And then
Totally.
we actually utilized ketamine to re-soften his defense. I mean, it's the whole
Right.
thing here. I mean, it's interesting, but either way, there's processes that all of us go through in order to come to the realizations that are needed in order to be in practice.
Right.
And I'm down with selfless practice. I'm not gonna. I have no argument against selfless. And I've worked with alcoholics and addicts from the day from forever.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like that's just it was my job, and so that was just happening. It wasn't selfless. You know what I mean? It was damn near it was working the nonprofit I worked at,
Right.
but it was working with others. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Always, and I've always worked with others in my own way. Actually, usually I felt a great sponsor, but always a great counselor, and I always counseled pretty much everybody my whole recovery. So I think about those processes, that there's a process that you went through, right? Obviously, you weren't introduced to the teacher that taught you selfless practice, if it was a teacher that taught you selfless practice 20 years ago. But there's an interesting question about, had you been introduced 20 years ago, would you have been ready?
I think if someone explained to me what it was, yeah, I would have. I mean, I had just gotten out of jail. I had just been like saved from a 25 to life sentence. At that point, I was like scared of going to prison.
Yeah,
So if
sure,
someone
he
had
was like me,
presented
yeah.
anything to me, I would have
Yeah.
been like, cool, let's
Sure.
do it. but I went through like a very structured behavior mod, sober living, Liberty House. Remember that place?
Yeah, it's now Awakenings Recovery. My friend.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, but
La-
it's not the same.
Larry would be really upset if he heard that, but yeah,
Oh,
totally.
that's good to know. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because Larry has a lot of pride around like the structure that he created around Liberty House,
Yeah.
and I think that anything other than what he is involved in would be less than.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Yeah.
that's kind of how we perceive things.
Dig it.
Yeah, I was brought up, thinking that Liberty House was the only way.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
was fucked. It's another cult.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing. It's like, I think if it was proposed to me in the very beginning, I would have latched onto it just because I was willing at that time.
Yeah.
What wound up happening is that I got so disenchanted by the fellowship, by the idea of a sponsor, by human dependence, by trying to fit myself in other people's box.
Yeah.
Also doing a lot of different inventory work and not experiencing like the relief and whatever that I heard people talking about, listening to promises that weren't happening for me, being resentful about that I was just like, met this dude and kind of had this last ditch effort where it's like, I'll try this one last thing, and if this doesn't work, fuck AA.
Yeah.
And that's basically where I ended up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I tried it, and what was explained to me the very first time with the circle and triangle really blew my mind, and it made me realize that for the entire 9.5 years I was essentially like white knuckling it. No wonder I was so miserable, and I've just been dedicating my life like ever since to teaching people that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
also like took away, the difference is that as soon as you get like a page, your task is just to pass that on to as many people as you can. And so then essentially all I do is become a page passer, which destroys the entire like hierarchy of sponsorships, like all that shit. And it gets people out of self, gets people not dependent upon me, dependent on a power greater than self. Through a selfless practice.
That's
and it all started to make sense in that way.
I think ultimately, and I, when I'm speaking carefully, I'm always careful about, I try to be careful of categories, because categories aren't reality.
No.
And so ultimately there's just a tremendous amount of diversity that exists in people and their experiences, and so I try to account for that. And sometimes that's why I'm like, no, I'm really glad. Like, I personally don't think I would like Pacific Group. I haven't gone, but I don't think it'd be my cup of tea.
I thought that too, and then I like spoke at a Pacific Group, and then they asked me to like speak on a Pacific Group retreat, which I like thought was so wild because
That's great. That's a good point. Yeah.
My ideology is so out there.
Yeah.
But they're so fucking kind.
I guess actually ultimately I want to take that back.
Yeah.
I think I would probably like Pacific Group, but I probably wouldn't join. So I would put it that way.
I wouldn't join anything.
Because I'm built like that.
I get that, same.
But ultimately, I'm very glad they exist. And
Yeah, me
ultimately,
too.
I'm very glad you exist. And
Thanks.
ultimately, I'm glad Hollywood Late Night exists. And
Totally.
ultimately, I'm glad I exist for people that are, interested in my ways of being in recovery or whatever.
Totally.
Right.
It's not my way though. But go ahead.
Dig it.
Totally.
Dig it. The way that works through you.
I guess so. But I mean,
A way
again,
that works through you.
not an original thought, and I'm literally just reading something that was written for me.
But you're a vessel.
Yeah.
You're a vessel. Somebody will have a different experience reading that page with you than with me. No doubt about it.
I don't know about that.
Oh, I think so.
I don't think so.
No, I think
But
so.
I'll tell you this, I have a different experience reading that page with every single different person that I read it with. So there's not a way to read the page.
Yeah. So
Because it's really about the connection
We agree.
to the moment with the person in
Yeah,
front
we
of
agree.
you.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
agree.
totally.
We agree. Right.
But even in that though,
Yeah.
what you realize is that we are all one. We are all connected. So that's like really the integration of like those great downloads that you get from these psychedelics is like you get to live that in practice. you
Yeah,
know?
and I mean, I'll say in some ways I'm really I mean, it's interesting to go to psych. Well, let me finish. There was one thing I was going to
sorry.
say. No. It was like it brought us down that great road. But what I was going to say was ultimately I'm incredibly curious about a vision of, let's say this, a group that utilizes psychedelics in some kind of ceremonial and reverential way. The goal of which is awakening, integration, experience, and selfless practice.
Totally.
And I would be so fascinated if there was enough infrastructure, community, and leadership in a group like that that was doing it for free all across the United States. And my hunch, and this is kind of what I'm after, my hunch is that you would see an imperfect community, but probably one of the more powerful, transformative communities in recovery that we could imagine. If it was held by the right people in the right way with the right goal and intention, and a really great goal like selfless practice that's simple, that's clear, that's obvious, and that can constantly redirect you towards what matters, what's your fellow person, right? Your fellow person and being out of self. I think for me, there's a vision like that of like, whoa, I think that would be incredibly powerful. And I work in relatively high acuity treatment. And so I work with people whose defenses are really complex. And we both work in reality, meaning also not only the defenses, but the constraints that exist of what somebody might be willing to do or how much time somebody has or, whatever. There's all of these constraints that exist beyond just the person that everybody deals with. And so there's a question about how within the constraints with a certain set of defenses do we give more people opportunity for awakening for an intention like selfless practice. For me, that's not the only intention that it's not my practice. It might be one day, but it's not now. So there are other intentions that exist for me, but
like what?
I really like to have a good time. I love to have fun.
Me too, dude.
So no, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So for me, you asked me what other intentions do I have in life. I'm telling you, like, I'm super into fun. I really like dancing and singing and art and creativity, and whatever. I have a bunch of
that's
intentions.
The thing. You can take like selfless practice to me is like that's just the foundation of my being. But
totally. Yeah.
And I can take that into any space, and I think it makes it more enjoyable.
I wasn't saying it's exclusive. I guess what I was saying is I might run into somebody that's not their goal. And I actually want to go back to selfless practice and talk about maybe, I have a question around it.
Okay.
Like somebody else might be like, well, I've just been fucking miserable my whole life, and I would just like to fucking be able to experience joy or love or connection. And you know what I mean? And for an alcoholic or non-alcoholic, between, sort of irrelevant. And I've had many experiences with people who they haven't felt like they've even taken a real breath in 20 years, or they lost themselves 30 years ago and find themselves in 4 hours in an awakening experience on medicine. Do they keep themselves? No. Right. But can it create a map for somebody who with practice can ground that in? Yeah, sure. Great.
Totally.
So I think for me, there's a vision there. Again, I don't think it's like utopian. I choose to be a person in 12-step community that this year came out. There was a reason why I didn't, and I wasn't open from the beginning about my psychedelic usage and advocating for it in some sense for people that were curious or that it made sense for.
Do you think you're an addict?
For sure. Alcoholic, but yeah.
So you think you have abnormal reaction?
I know I do, but yeah.
You do?
Yeah, to alcohol. No doubt about it.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah, my dad was alcoholic. My grandfather died of alcoholism. First time I drank, I blacked out. I have a particular set of hangovers. I mean, sure. I think I check all the boxes. But I'm not... The way that AA defines alcoholism, I do not agree with in its entirety.
Well, when you say AA, do you mean the book or do you mean the people?
I mean the book.
Well, the book only defines it under one thing.
Yeah. I don't agree with it.
Totally. You don't agree with allergy?
I agree that it's an allergy. I don't agree that it's not curable or that can't change in somebody in a lifetime.
Right, okay.
So that's what I don't disagree with, just because I've seen different.
Yeah.
I agree it's very close. So I tell people when I'm running group, I say, it's sort of like if you're going to get a terminal brain tumor diagnosis, you pretty much should make sure you got a will happening. So that's the way I feel, but I have seen exceptions, I would say.
So would you, I've seen a lot of exceptions, and I don't know if they're exceptions.
I've seen real alcoholics that I've seen drink normally later. That's what I mean.
So would you look at that as like a hard drinker, or would you look at that as an alcoholic?
So to me, that's a closed definition that AA has. And so there is no way for somebody to, within the definition of Alcoholics Anonymous in the literature, there's no way for somebody to be a real alcoholic and then drink again, because that automatically disqualifies you. I disagree with that way of defining something, and I don't think it's true in the world.
Okay.
So meaning, if I met somebody who...
But see, then the premise of like abstinence is...
Yes, I we could talk about that. I mean, I guess
Okay.
here's what I would say. Just if we take a second,
I love this.
it's fun.
Yeah, it's good.
If you met somebody who
Right.
is from a lineage of alcoholics, of people that died from alcoholism, and that person started drinking at 10 years old
Totally.
and drank a gallon of vodka a day and
Right.
ended up homeless with no teeth and, for 40 years. And at 55 went into rehab and got sober
Mm-hmm.
and then was able to have a beer twice a year. Would you say, well, I guess he wasn't a real alcoholic? I think that's a ridiculous way to define real alcoholic. I think the fact that he comes from a lineage and drank for 40 years to death and lost all his teeth and then,
I don't know.
Yeah, for me,
Yeah.
I'm saying for me, I call that person an alcoholic who can have a drink again, which is like shocking. But yeah, you were an alcoholic and something happened that you're not. Much like somebody who you had cancer and somehow went into remission in ways we don't understand. I mean, for me, that exists as a fact in the world. What we call it exactly, I don't really care. But if one was to ask me, do I completely agree with the definition of alcoholism in AA, I'd say no, which I know is annoying because it doesn't make it one thing.
It's
but
not annoying. I do think that there's a much smaller population of alcoholics based on the definition of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous than people understand.
Oh, we agree.
Yeah.
We agree that probably 90% of the people
Are not.
No, and I'm specific about alcoholism, by the way. I do not lump alcoholism and addiction into the same bucket.
I do.
Yeah, I don't. I
Yeah.
think that they are different phenotypes. I think they have different histories and the way they work in biology. The first alcoholic that I know in recorded history was Noah in the Bible. So that thing's been around a long time.
Totally.
I think there's a really specific,
So-
specific lineages here.
Yeah, okay. I think that it's harder to define an addict based on like the nature of
I do too.
drugs.
I do too.
Some things create physical dependence, which can mask as addiction,
Yeah.
but it's not abnormal reaction.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to do a lot of I have to do a lot of investigative work when I'm working with people to really figure out or help them figure out what they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, for me, the evidence I got sober young, like you. So I got sober at 21. It wasn't like I had 50 years of drinking history like my father. I didn't die drinking like my grandfather.
right.
But for me, when you asked me the question, immediately I remember how my body felt. I remember my body. I mean, whatever. There was that I was a blackout drinker, that every time I drank, I blacked out. You know what I
Totally.
mean? And I drank a lot,
Yeah.
But I remember my body. I mean, I really do. Like, that's why the word allergy really resonates with me.
Mm-hmm.
Which I used to like, and then I was like, oh no, they're talking about something. That
Have you tried to drink again?
No.
Why?
I'm an alcoholic.
Okay.
Yeah,
So just alcohol.
Yeah.
Have you tried other things
I have, sure. Yeah, I mean, I've done psychedelics. Yeah,
besides psychedelics?
Yeah,
Though
psychedelics.
that's it.
yeah,
Okay, cool,
yeah.
interesting.
Um,
And I've got a question.
yeah, please.
Like when you started psychedelics, your original intention was
It's a great question.
yeah.
It was interesting. I mean, I had a specific intention that I was going in with, but it was more circumstance, actually.
What do you mean? What happened?
Yeah, so I was 10 years sober,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a personal betrayal in my life that was super difficult.
Okay.
And it kind of it reoriented, it kind of broke what I thought of as my life. 'Cause I
Right.
had built this life in recovery, and it was beautiful, and I got really hurt. And it was a difficult process, but also a beautiful process because it caused me to reevaluate what was important,
Right.
for me. And I realized, and this is an interesting question that goes back to selfless practice, that in some ways, because I had internalized an idea of me as not good, because I started acting out when I was so young,
Mm-hmm.
that I sort of, I think like a lot of people in recovery, I wanted to be really good.
What is good?
For me at the time, good was telling the truth. Good was having
Okay.
integrity. Good was being of service to others. Good was taking care of the people around me. Good was shooting for selfless practice. Good was serving God. It was
Right.
being a rabbi. I mean, it was a bunch of things for me.
Okay.
But it was good. I mean, it was good.
It was good. Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, no, it was good. I look back at that time. I knew it at the time. I know it now. I look back. I'm really proud of myself. I was like, "Whoa, man, you were young. You were for real." And And I think when I got hurt, it hurt me. And I started to evaluate, wow, you've been really focused on the good. But what do you want
Right.
in this world? And I was in the shower. I read an article like, I don't know, 5 years before or something. I'm in the shower and I'm like, I want to go to Peru and drink ayahuasca. That's what I want to do. I really want to. And I remember I yelled out the shower. My wife was pregnant with our third kid. And I said, I'm going to go to Peru to drink ayahuasca. We can talk about it, but I'm going to go. And then I had an intention. I actually had two. One was I wanted to know what this place was. I'm an incredibly philosophically curious person.
Right.
So I wanted insight into the nature of reality, the nature of my soul, other people's souls. And then I wanted to open my heart and learn to give and receive more love. Those were my two intentions when I went.
Okay.
So that's what motivated me. I had a circle of people that I felt obliged to tell, my bosses, because I worked in a treatment program at the time.
Was this Beit Teshuva?
This was Beit Shuva.
Yeah, I remember.
And my wife and my in-laws and my folks and a group of people that I influenced. I had made a choice. I'm not going to talk about this in
Right.
AA, but I'm okay with that.
Why?
For other people. I was afraid I was going to influence them because I was a role model.
Yeah, but if you don't think that allergy exists, then why would you be afraid?
I think there are risks associated with people going to take psychedelics. And so, and particularly at the time, I also hadn't done it myself at
Right.
that time. And so for me, I went, am I comfortable not being transparent, open, and honest for the sake of others, not for me, in terms of risk-benefit stuff? Can I hold that, be honest with my sponsor? And I went, yeah, I could do that. So I did. I'm making
Interesting.
it sound easier than it was. It was its own emotional
I can
process.
imagine.
I was afraid of losing my sobriety and what's going to happen. And, there wasn't people that I knew at the time in recovery that had done that. So I
Right.
didn't have somebody to talk to about it. And I did it. Yeah. And I did it. Yeah.
And then what?
Super interesting. I was saying this at the conference. A friend recently, those experiences continue to unfold like all experiences. So you're looking at then what? But to some degree, oh my God, it was such a spiritual renewal for me, actually. But when my friend asked me recently, what did I get from going to Peru? And I feel comfortable giving the same answer.
Well, you've done it more than once or just once?
Ayahuasca way more than once. Yeah,
Okay,
sure. But she asked me the first time you went, because it was this conversation. I said it reacquainted me with the unknown. And that really renewed my spirit. My spirit had been weary, and it rejuvenated me. I was already embedded in a life of...
So hold on one second. For
yeah.
like people who are going to listen to this,
Yeah,
like
great.
to be reacquainted with the unknown,
Yeah.
like how would you put that in layman's terms?
I think that is layman, reacquainted to get to know.
Because it sounds like elusive, you know what I mean? In its own way.
Yeah. So I think it's no different than what you were saying when you talked about your way of being in the beginning of this conversation. You're like, I'm just kind of here now. And this is kind of mysterious, right? This here now is a mysterious thing that's happening.
Maybe.
Like, well, that's what you're saying. You're saying there's a state of being that exists in the now, and here's what it is, right?
Well, it's
But-
just that I'm sitting in a chair across from you. We're just
Maybe.
having a conversation.
Maybe.
Yeah, if
or
we're
we
gonna,
could be
yeah,
in a-
totally. We can go down some like matrix rabbit hole,
Yeah,
but for
yeah.
like the sake of the
Yeah.
most real and most true that we can get, it's just
Yeah.
this, you know?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to what I was saying about memory
Right.
and projection.
Okay.
That I think human beings move in and out of being more in touch with what is happening now. And I'm calling what is happening now the unknown.
Okay, I understand that.
Okay, versus my projection from memory, which
Okay.
makes me feel secure, but also can trap me in my ego, I guess one would say.
Okay, so connected to the present. Okay.
Yeah, sure, something like that.
Cool.
Yeah, so I think that's the answer that I gave. That's what I got. I also, to be real with you,
I hope so.
yeah. To be real with myself, to be real out loud.
Yeah.
I am a person that when I feel centered and connected to divine patterns and energies and ways of being.
Mm-hmm.
And in getting hurt, I got disconnected from that in some sense.
Right.
I don't think it was an accident, by the way, whatever that means.
Don't think so either.
And so I don't think it was an accident that I went to Peru, and I don't think what happened for me there was an accident. And my experience coming back was not only was I able to connect with those patterns and energies again, but I was able to connect to them in a new way that have more space to it, more openness, more love. There are things I think from psychedelics that I mean, like if somebody were to ask me the facts, had you not gone to Peru and we were having this conversation now, would my life be better or worse? I don't know.
Right.
That part I don't know. Has there been complications from my psychedelic usage in my life that were difficult and painful? Yeah.
There have been.
There has. Yeah, there has. Uh-huh. Yeah.
How often do you go back?
Now, I mean, I don't know, should I say this out loud? This is interesting. I utilize psychedelics about quarterly.
Okay.
And I do it primarily with my family.
Okay.
Not my kids.
How old are your kids?
My oldest is 19.
Okay.
My youngest is 3.
Oh, so your 3-year-old's not.
No, although interestingly, the Santo Daime tradition, which is an ayahuasca tradition coming out of Brazil, it's, I think 150 years old or so. When the babies are born in that tradition, they put ayahuasca in their mouths.
Interesting.
And when they turn 12 as rite of passage, they enter into ceremony with them. They do like weekly, sort of like a combination of indigenous and Christian mythology.
Right.
And they dress up in white, and it's in the daytime. And so in the Santo Daime tradition, yeah, babies drink ayahuasca.
Don't you think that we're taking like the wrong thing from the indigenous people down there?
I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, be more specific when you say the wrong thing.
I mean, like, we're focused on like the ayahuasca, like that stuff.
Got it.
Versus like the way of living, community.
I mean, I think there's a lot that culture is appropriate. I don't think we're just taking ayahuasca. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I think we have.
I feel like we're appropriating the easy way out as opposed to looking at actually how people live. You know?
I mean, if I were to take where I would agree and reaffirm is that there is a particular form of attunement that we have in the West that is kind of mechanistic in its thinking and kind of extractive in its thinking and kind of possessive in its thinking. And so a lot of the ways that we interact with culture reflect that. If you're asking, do I like that? I don't like that. No, I don't like that in myself.
Right.
And I can be that way. I don't like that in others. I don't know that doesn't exist in indigenous tribes. I've never lived with an indigenous tribe for 5 years, but I might find that in some members of the indigenous tribe and go, I really don't like that. You seem like a possessive, controlling person or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? But no, I don't like that. I could also say there is definitely parts of me that have judgments. I mean, one, I'm mixed. I'm Black and Jewish, so I have judgments about white people drinking ayahuascas in their living rooms and flying shamans. Yeah, I mean, I find it kind of repugnant. I mean, if you want to know the truth.
Right.
But I also don't idealize indigenous cultures
either.
You know what I mean? And I try not to be over controlling and over judgmental about this, what's happening now. So yes, I have those responses. Yes, I have opinions. I want, like the way I do psychedelics now, I really like how I do it. I do it with my parents. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad, for saying that out loud, who are 80.
That's great.
And I fly my cousins in who maybe are struggling, and my sisters and their friends, and it's a very familial, and we do ceremony, we do land offerings, but it's ours. Like, we made up our own deal. Some of it's traditional, some of it's not. I really enjoy that. I like that if and when my kids get introduced to that,
so your 19-year-old doesn't do it either?
Well, I'm not going to speak about my children.
Oh, okay.
But
I understand.
If that's their experience of drugs, and
You're
it's
good
with their
it.
grandparents, and it's not on Sunset Boulevard, not that anybody goes to Sunset Boulevard anymore. That's how old I am.
Totally.
Not only do I like it, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it, man. There's love there and ritual there. And I think that is part of my thing, is like, are there people that are going to reclaim ritual and love and care I do think these are medicines. I think they exist for a reason. I think they're going to be big problems, and they're here, you know,
Right.
and they're being utilized. And they create issues, but not using medicine also can create issues for people.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, if people don't have a practice. I guess I'm.
Well, but I think my question around practice is, and I guess you could tell me this: how do you think about people that come into your circle? And I don't know if this happens. Seem to be doing the work, but maybe don't find relief, or do you not find that?
I've never met anybody who's done the work. The work is like very clear.
Yeah.
And it's clear when people are doing the work.
Yeah.
Who don't find relief.
Got it.
I've never seen that.
Have you seen people that come in and appear to do the work, but from your perspective, they're not doing the work? Like, meaning, are there people who go through, and I don't know the work that well, so you can correct me, but are going through the study and then the practice of working with others in practice, who are saying that they're not getting the benefit, but you're like, well, you're not doing it right, or your heart's not in it, or you're not selfless enough, or like, how do you think about that?
I don't know that there's no right or wrong. That's the cool thing about the work. Really, all I'm passing on to people are underlines and highlights and circles.
Yeah.
The conversation is whatever it is around those underlines and highlights and circles. So it's not like there's not a right or wrong way.
Yeah.
To me, it's really just about, like, are you consistent with it, and are you doing it at volume? If you have a daily reprieve, are you working with at least a person a day?
Yeah.
Or are you not?
And so have you seen somebody who is doing the circle and underlining and is seeing a person a day, claims to not get relief, and then goes out?
No.
No. Really?
Never. Not once.
Not once.
Not a single time.
Jesus,
The people.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
Wow.
but I mean, I think, like, that's because really that's what it was designed to do and how it was designed to work. So.
Yeah. Have you seen people that, for whatever's going on, let's call it in their defenses or in their psychological makeup, they can't connect to it in a way that would allow them that reprieve?
There's people that I've worked with that I didn't think that they would be able to find anybody to work with because they were so out of their fucking minds.
Yeah.
Yet they did.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I've seen, like, miracles happen with people that, like, I just thought were on some real mental health issues, you know? So I think that's why I believe in it so much. And also the fact that it's, like, very simple and replicable, you know what I mean? It's not that
so
big.
You haven't seen people, I mean, which is deep to me, that have come in to start to do the work and couldn't, meaning something was going on with them that they weren't able to get their feet moving, so, like, basically everybody who walks in and starts to do the work gets better. Everybody. There's nobody that
Who actually does the work.
got it. But I'm also asking, are there people that, like,
are unwilling to do the work?
Something's not just unwilling.
Well, check it out.
Unable. Is what I'm saying. Like, maybe you think it's unwilling or you're not sure, but, like, oh no, they're too impulsive or too out of it, or
None of that.
Well,
I mean, the
okay.
thing is, what I'm seeing now in terms of, like, the strenuous aspect is people battling, I think, a lot of indoctrination from the fellowship, which is you don't have enough time. Like, you haven't been through all 12 steps.
Got it.
Like, you have nothing to offer. Sit down, shut the fuck up, and listen. Which I think is really fucked up and, like, infantilizes people rather than empowers them. I think that the 12 steps is a much more of a self-empowerment thing than it is, not self, but you know what I mean? Like, individual empowerment thing than it is what we're exposed to. So that's pretty much the biggest challenge that I see people going through. But once they walk through that and they get through their first one, they're like, oh, wait, that was really fucking easy, you know? And then it's about, like, the consistency. So when I was introduced to this, about a 9.5 years sober. And I've been working with, like, 1 to 9 people a day for the last 16 and a half years, without fail, you know? So
And how long in your experience when you started to practice, um, you were still having a lot of challenges in your life for a decent period of time after you started to practice, or no?
No. I mean, the thing is that life definitely threw me stuff
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
challenging, but comparatively to practice versus no practice,
Yeah.
like I wasn't trying to kill myself.
You weren't suicidal after 9.5 years once you started selfless practice.
No. Like there was this sort of underlying feeling of like, I'm good, I'm taken care of, I don't have anything to worry about, like God's got me,
Yeah.
you know, that I didn't really have before. And also those challenging experiences created such a launching pad for like growth beyond what I...
And do you work with people who just, if it's just mental health, by the way?
That's what I wrote that for.
Yeah, right. Just mental health, right?
Mental health or just
Or like it could be anybody.
literally anyone.
So would you, I mean, obviously you kind of put it in the world, it's no longer your baby, but if somebody started a group where people were utilizing psychedelics and selfless practice.
That's what that's for.
Yeah.
So basically the book that I wrote is like to help people integrate
Yeah.
whatever they're getting from
That's great.
psychedelics into their life.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll,
We should.
yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I think that, I mean, and I was talking about this a little bit earlier with PD. A lot of the mental health issues, I think, are like bullshit in terms of like the diagnosis stuff and like the medical interventions that are proposed in that area.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that stuff is just being a human being, and you know, getting outside of self. I think for human beings is just essential to peace.
Yeah, we concur, right?
You know?
I mean, I totally agree with you that, well, I want to be super clear. There are really significant mental health challenges that people have
Yeah.
that are really big deals. I'm a fan of antipsychotics. I'll say that out loud. I've seen people who I don't think would have gotten better in any practice need in my opinion, need.
I have seen that
antipsychotics
too.
to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on that.
But I think in general, what we agree upon is mental health and diagnosis is a term that's describing a phenomenon and a cluster of associations. And people get better when they can connect to themselves, connect to others, and have purpose in some way. And so as much as mental health is really kind of complicated in terms of how it might manifest or what it might feel like or what it's like to experience somebody when they're in the midst of it, the solution in some sense actually is not, I agree with you, nearly as complicated as people make it out to be.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would agree with you there. And not in every situation, but in most situations. I would
Totally.
say.
Especially today in most situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've created most of what we consider to be the mental health issues
Well,
socially.
yeah, and I think also it's motivated by a lot of greed. I think a lot of that has to do with just billing, you know?
Yeah. But yeah, and contingency and history and ways that we think about the mind and the psyche. I mean, that stuff has changed drastically in the last several hundred years.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that people just forget, like and this again could be rooted in complete story because I don't know if it's true or not at all.
That's great.
But I'm assuming that when we were first on this earth, our brains were occupied with like finding shelter, hunting for food, protecting ourselves from predators,
Sounds
that kind of
reasonable.
shit,
Yeah,
right?
sounds reasonable.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But now we don't live that life,
Yeah.
right? We live pretty sedentary lives in comparison, yet we have brains that have the capacity to deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we just over fucking think shit, dude.
I
You know,
agree
it's
with that.
really challenging to be present because we don't have shit to do, and you're gonna tell somebody that their 9 to 5 job is their fucking purpose.
Yeah.
You know, or that relationship is their purpose. I mean, that's where you start worshiping all these things that don't yield peace. And yeah, so I think most mental health issues are just because we overthink and we have the, not the inability, but we just don't have the path put before us to be able to live in the present.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
another thing about the book, and I think why like having a dialogue is important is
Yeah.
because it gets you present.
Yeah.
You know, can you imagine if like we were having this conversation, I just started drifting off and thinking about like McDonald's and
I don't have to imagine. I'm thinking about a
You
carne
know?
asada burrito. With
Have you
French
been at
fries
Brothers
in it, bro.
Cousins, bro?
No, but you want to go today? Because I've heard about it.
Dude,
man.
it's right up the street from my
It
house.
sounds,
Yeah.
somebody was just telling me about
You
yesterday.
can come to the meeting at our house on
I'll
Thursday
come,
nights.
man.
It's sick,
I'll
dude.
come, man. I'll bring my kid. He needs,
Yeah.
My son needs selfless practice.
It'd be great.
No, he's actually better than me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally.
There's a couple thoughts I had about. I do think that the human nervous system and human development is a particular constrained phenomenon, meaning there are certain things that happen in development that's like pretty well mapped, that I feel comfortable going, okay, yeah, this is part of what it means to be a human growing. And I think separate from society and how we've developed over time, there were always things that could happen in the process of development that cause what we would now refer to as mental illness. I would probably say that cultures and societies that were simpler and more connected to the planet and more connected to each other had more holistic remedies and containers that allowed that to not be as detrimental.
Or might have experienced less because of the design, right?
Yeah, maybe. Or, I mean, listen, it's difficult for me to say.
Right, because we didn't grow up like that.
Oh, I also just don't. It's to me a really interesting question. Like, when we think of trauma, and we think of a warring tribe 3,000 years ago, what happened? My guess is it's not what I tend to think probably not ideal. I tend to think there probably were. I mean, I guess like you could think about if you read the Bible, which this part was probably written 2,500 years ago or something like that. And there's a line in there that says, "What do we do with the rebel boy, the rebel child?" And so we take him out to the side of the village and we stoned him to death.
Right.
And so when I read that, and my rabbi, used to talk about this, like, what the fuck's going on there? I mean, that's brutal. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And then we're like, oh, well, it's a normal phase of development that a small subsect of males between the age of 13 and 19 are a little bit sociopathic and antisocial, right? It's like a normal thing. Now, not everybody, but there's a group of kids kind of genetically, based on diversity within the species, that are fucking rebel rousers.
Right.
And if they were going and raping girls in the neighboring tribe and causing issues for everybody, they were like, we got to fucking kill this guy. Now, nowadays, we would label that and we'd say, you're antisocial, you're a sociopath. And some of them probably would be sociopaths.
Or we just put them in the military.
Right. Or we put them in. But my point is, like, I think that there have always been certain repeating patterns and phenomena that we now call mental health. I think that there is certain things we've contributed to and certain things we don't deal with well, right? And we try to solve things and create issues when we solve things. But I think that there's kind of a biological, genetic, and developmental basis to certain recurring issues that have existed with humans for a long time. And maybe some of those things are even adaptive, So it's interesting to think, is it necessary for the human species to have malignant narcissism in order to survive? That some percentage of humans are very narcissistic. But under these conditions, that's very helpful for the species, right? I mean, these are things.
Well, what do you think
that are worth
self-preservation is, right?
I mean, I think there's self-preservation, there's malignant narcissism, and they're not the same.
I think that they're born from the same thing. I think it's just a spectrum,
For sure, there's a spectrum of narcissism. But I'm talking about when people become malignantly narcissistic in a way where they're almost incapable of selfless practice, that might have an adaptive function for the species.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's incapable of selfless practice. I don't think that it's being proposed to people as like a solution, though. I think if people understood that was like a viable solution, altruism, pro-social behavior, instead of kind of like everything else that's being proposed today, which is either a Band-Aid or kind of an awakening type experience. And I mean that even through therapy and stuff like that. I think that's part of the problem. I'm in. Yeah.
I'm in.
Nothing.
And amen.
Right. Nothing changes like this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you want to have growth in any area of your
Yeah.
life, it has to be consistency. It has to be volume, period.
Yeah.
At anything.
Yeah.
So why would selfless practice, spirituality, mental health.
Yeah.
Why would that be any different?
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
You know what I mean?
I think you're
So,
100% right.
Yeah,
And I
totally.
don't know the answer either. Are there, you know, I mean, AA asked that question interestingly. Are there people that are incapable? And they said only those that are constitutionally capable of being honest with themselves. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying that's their opinion on it.
Right. And
Which is
like,
an interesting question.
it is an interesting question.
Yeah.
When I get to that piece of the book, I always ask the person, what's your name?
Yeah.
You know, and then they tell me their name. I'm like, great, you're not constitutionally incapable of being honest with yourself.
Nice.
Just
Yeah.
move on from that.
Yeah.
I think that the, you know, constitutionally incapable of being honest aspect really is around like mental obsession, ability to believe a lie, distinct to do I have allergy or not, you know, which I think is something that needs to maintain.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Or again, mental health. Somebody, I mean,
which again, I think is still mental obsession and spiritual malady. That's all mental health is to me. If you understand that mental obsession is the ability to believe a lie, the inability to be in the truth, which is the present, and the emotional dysregulation that comes from that.
yeah.
The stories that we believe
I mean, I
have.
think that's one. Yeah, I mean, I think that's there. The guy who I like here is this guy Wilfred Bion, who's an awesome fucking psychoanalyst, right? Amazing. But he says he doesn't say this. This is my version of what he's saying.
The paraphrase, I love it.
The
Shia
mind
phrase.
needs truth, and the heart needs love.
Okay.
And for me, health, that's what we mean by mental health. I mean, so I'm agreeing with you, right? Like, yeah,
Totally.
mental health is somebody who can be in truth, be here, but also, you know, here.
Totally.
Yeah.
But I think if you utilize the intention of love to be in the truth,
100%.
you kill both birds with
I
one
love
stone.
it. I actually believe you, and I really love and am inspired by the vision of more people engaging in a deep selfless practice.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm inspired by it. I mean, I'm fucking down.
I mean, I've dedicated my life to it.
Yeah, it's really cool,
You
man.
know, it's the only thing that's like really helped me. But yeah, I think like you and I, the only difference of opinions that we really have is whether or not allergy exists in the context of, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous in terms of not being able to heal out of it versus being able to heal out of it. I think that's literally the only thing. You
Yeah.
know?
And for me, that distinction's irrelevant. I mean, I don't even care. You know, like what I tell people, ultimately, it's each person's responsibility
Totally.
to figure out whether they want to choose to do something, you know, like,
For sure.
because for me, what I find surprising about it, and this is why I use the brain tumor analogy, I say, well, you know, if you get a diagnosis of having a brain tumor, you should probably write your will and get your affairs in order.
Right.
And if you're an alcoholic, I think you should probably get into recovery if you're a real alcoholic. And if there is 0.001% of people that meet criteria and are able to drink again, it's probably not you. So who cares? So for me, it's almost irrelevant. It's just a factual distinction that I make based on my experience if somebody asks me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's only relevant in terms of, and this is, I've had experiences of people that I worked with where people were like actually pushing psychedelics onto them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know,
Like somebody was pushing somebody else onto somebody was pushing psychedelics onto somebody else.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, sure.
Within a 12-step space.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I
I've
just,
heard of that, sure. Yeah.
you know, my opinion was you can try it if you want,
Yeah.
like see how that works for you.
Yeah.
You know, but
Interesting. Yeah.
but I just, yeah, I mean, I've also heard of so many cases of people doing ayahuasca, which, you know, there was a time in my life where I thought that that would not be something that triggered allergy. You know, it was very benign in that way.
Sure.
But then I've met people who've gone to, you know, Peru or South America, Costa Rica or whatever to do journeys and have been fucked. And then I've also met people.
Well, what happened? Tell me the specific. You knew a person that was in recovery for a long time.
Yeah, I think 4+ years or something like that.
Yeah.
And also subscribe to the idea of like, I'm healed. I want a next level of my spiritual experience.
Yeah.
Went to ayahuasca, had a cup, and then like wanted more immediately, and like literally got almost in a fight with the shaman to get more.
I've never heard of anything like that.
Which
ever.
is really funny to me. It's a great story.
Yeah.
And then came back and like, you know, try to get M80s from Germany sent
Wow.
here to, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
How are they now?
They know that they need to be abstinent, which is what they're pursuing.
Do they regret the experience, the ayahuasca experience?
No, it was a learning thing for them, but
Yeah.
they also made it through it.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't survive that shit.
I think that
And one other thing,
yeah,
I've
please.
also seen
Yeah.
people like move the goalposts too,
yeah,
where it's like, it starts with, we want to do ayahuasca or psilocybin.
Sure.
You know what I mean? With the intention.
Yeah.
Let's say like people want to like get closer or whatever.
yeah,
And that's what they want to do. They want to do it quarterly, like you're talking about.
Sure.
But then that just changes.
I've seen tons of that.
Yeah.
I think there's a normal kind of psychedelic trajectory for people in recovery that I see. They tend to get excited. They tend to overdo it for 2 or 3 years. Then they have a rough experience. I mean, there's a whole.
But goalposts even like changes in terms of what other substances they start exploring.
For sure. Yeah, but I guess the thing that why I get nonplussed about that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm plussed about that if I'm working with somebody and we're talking through their situation. Is that those same things happen with people that don't do psychedelics all the time? And so I'm like, this is a human phenomenon, right?
Totally.
Like somebody's sober, then they try weed, or somebody tries, like, okay, somebody's sniffing gabapentin. I mean, there's all kinds of shit
For
that
sure.
people are doing. And that's what it is. I mean, so for me, it's like, that's why I say I expect everything people are afraid of going wrong with psychedelics. I expect all of it's going to go wrong. You know what I mean? And so I don't. But I don't think about that in a context of like, well, therefore that shouldn't happen. I'm like, well, no, because things are already going wrong in many ways. And of course, I could lay my difficulties that I've had in psychedelics, which I've had.
Mm-hmm.
I could talk about people who I've worked with people who I think had psychedelic-induced psychosis and are permanently changed in terms of their mental health. I've been working with somebody for 2.5 years that went on an ayahuasca ceremony, had a psychotic break, and didn't recover, and is now medicated and building his life back, and a fucking inspiration in many ways. And I attribute that to drinking ayahuasca.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so for me, but I've also, met people who were walking down the street and had a psychotic break, or were smoking weed and had you know what I mean?
Totally.
So like, I'm like, yeah, that's true and real. Let's own it. Let's be honest about what's going on. And of course I could give, 35 stories of people who were suffering tremendously, and psychedelics changed their life for the better, and they didn't move the goalpost, or, you know what I mean?
Totally.
I actually know very few people. I actually don't know if I know anybody, and I'm pretty plugged into the underground psychedelic recovery community. All 12 of us, or 1,000 of us, or whatever it is.
Yeah, there's more than 12.
Yeah, there's.
Yeah, they're fucking lying, dog.
10,000.
Yeah, for sure.
5% of the people in recovery, maybe.
Yeah.
Mainly therapists. I actually do not personally know somebody, which is interesting to me, because I would think that I would. I'm sure I will. That had time,
Mm-hmm.
that I knew personally, that talked to me, so I know that they were doing this.
Right.
That went and did psychedelics, and then they relapsed.
Right.
I haven't met that person yet, which is interesting. I hear you saying you know somebody like that, but I don't.
Question for you.
Yeah.
So, like,
I will know somebody like that. I'm not saying I think
I
that's
promise
impossible.
you.
I'm
I'll
sure
have him
they're
call
out
you.
there.
I'll have him call you.
I'm
if
sure
you
they're
want.
out there. Yeah.
I'm sure he'll watch this podcast.
Yeah.
I love him very much.
Yeah.
He's funny as fuck. Do you think that, like, I'm all about like cleaning out the fellowship of like AA, you know what I mean? In terms of like not having people there that don't need to be there, I think that like I would like to have a safe space for people
Yeah.
that need to be abstinent, because I do believe those people
Totally,
exist.
Yeah. So maybe, and this was, I think, really what caught my ear.
Mm-hmm.
There was a particular word you used when you did your video,
Mm-hmm.
and you said plant medicine people creeping. And when you said the word creeping, I went, well, there's all kind of motherfuckers creeping into AA.
Lots of creeps.
And so I think that was the part where I was like, I'm a pluralist. AA doesn't have a hierarchy. There's nobody in charge.
No.
And so if you want to start Spiritual Revolution AA meetings, you can. If this person wants to start, I'm not saying you do. I'm just saying AA is built in such a way, which is one of the reasons I appreciate it, that people can build whatever they want.
Right.
and there can be open meetings or closed meetings. So do I think there should be spaces where plant medicine is not normatively and culturally allowed within Alcoholics Anonymous in a closed meeting because there are specific rules that violate the normal structure of AA? Yeah, I do. I even think there should and could be anti-psychedelic meetings in AA.
Yeah, but I'm not like, I mean,
No,
yeah,
no.
whatever.
But no,
totally.
I'm saying for me,
Yeah.
I'm down. I'm not an Orthodox Jew. I'm not a Haredi Jew that thinks there should be settlers in certain areas in Israel.
Right.
Do I think that Haredi Jews should exist? Yeah, dude, I support their right to exist, 100%.
I just think that like AA was designed for people who have an abnormal reaction based on like the definition of alcoholism in the book. So
I think it's I think yes, and I think it's complicated. I think that as you mentioned in the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill was a guy who did LSD in 1960 some odd,
55 or 6.
whatever it was.
Yeah, totally.
At UCLA, under a particular protocol, attempted to get it included in the literature. It happened to not get included.
He was also somebody who stopped working the program
Maybe
for like years.
I'm not saying he was or wasn't. I'm not even saying
Yeah.
Bill was a saint or I like Bill or I would want to hang out with him.
Totally.
All I'm saying is AA has a particular structure. It has its own boundaries. It has its own requirements. I love them.
And AA was not Bill.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It developed. Yeah.
That's just like
Yeah. I agree.
one dude's experience.
Totally.
You know?
And so for me, my answer to your question is, do I think the whole fellowship should be cleaned out? No, not at all. I don't even know what that means. And to me, I don't want anybody cleaning out the whole fellowship. I don't trust that person. But should there be meetings? Yeah, totally, man. I think that's super important, man.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that, like, I mean, I wouldn't be upset if people, like, who didn't need to be in AA didn't go to AA.
Yeah, I mean,
but I think it's
that's
like
an interesting thing. Like, you don't need to be in AA. Where are you go? I mean, do you like it? I mean, great. And
I
there's
think
some meetings that are open that allow people to go whether they're alcoholics
totally
or not.
to
and some
investigate
aren't.
that shit.
And I'm fine with that structure.
Yeah,
It doesn't
for
bother
sure.
me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm afraid of utopias, even though I try to build them.
That's so funny.
They
I
freak
worked
me
with
out.
a dude who's also afraid of utopia.
Yeah.
I guess, like, what is utopia?
Well, they just become fascist. That's all. It's just like it becomes shorthand for control because, you know, humans have a hard time accepting this.
I don't think that utopia would be control.
I agree. So that's why I think people should be able to open any kind of meetings they want within the. You know?
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just like, I think it makes me feel some kind of way where there's not like a space where people who need to be abstinent can just be abstinent.
But isn't there, I mean, I guess my thing would be, isn't there 1,000 of those across the country?
I don't know, dude. Not anymore. I mean, that's the thing.
Where
It's
people
like,
can be abstinent in an AA meeting? And
well, they can be, but
you think that like there's a serious kind of like threat of
Well,
abstinence-based AA
when you
meetings
have
right now?
like terms coming around, like, you know, I mean, Cali Sober's been around for a long
Sure.
time.
Okay, got
But
it.
like the whole idea of what sobriety is,
Oh, got it. I
is
see what
now
you're saying.
just like
I
up
see
to
what you're
your
saying.
own personal belief,
Yeah, that doesn't bother me.
you know?
That doesn't bother me. I have my opinions on what any given individual might do, but I actually think that how we think about relationship to substances is going to change, and so maybe that fundamental distinction that we have around the allergy is
It's a big deal.
is a big deal.
Yeah.
Because I ultimately think that I see a vision of the future where people think about their relationship to substances more like diet
Right.
than they do, which to me relates to ideas of allergy, what works in my body and my nervous system and what doesn't,
Right.
than I do, which has been a changing landscape in AA. I mean,
But isn't the reason why Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, all these different substance-specific anonymous groups were formed was because, you know, people were trying to have a different relationship with drugs or alcohol, and they couldn't because of an abnormal reaction to it.
Well, no, I think that the reality of that was much more nuanced. Alcoholics were often trying to have a different relationship to alcohol. I don't think that there was some we have some big data set on alcoholics eating mushrooms from 1960 to 1975 and what happened there while working a program. I mean, I think it was much more nuanced. I mean, that the realities of what was going on with different people. I think there are plenty of people who were heroin addicts for 20 years, and I would say they were heroin addicts, full-on heroin addicts who have a glass of wine.
Right. But again, I think like that's part of like the problem, and that's why like people need to take the time to sort of like.
What's part of the problem? Though? I want to know what you mean when you say that.
This is where I think addiction and alcoholism are under the same umbrella.
They are under the same umbrella.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So I think that people are misdiagnosed addicts based on their physical dependence, based on the nature of the compound they're using, right?
Got it. Yes, I think it's really tricky. I mean, I think that's really tricky because if I give the example of somebody who's, shooting heroin for 20 years and you go, oh, well, now you can drink wine, so you weren't a heroin addict. For me, now, do I ultimately know the ontological status of that person that shot heroin for 20 years? No, I can't. I'm not God. But I would just it's easier and simpler for me to classify that person as a heroin addict because they shot dope for 20 years.
But if we don't define like the terms of addiction or alcoholism, whatever, to like a specific thing, then we don't really know what the solution is going to be. For some people who have that's what makes it cool about
I disagree with that. I agree with you that selfless practice would be the solution for the whole category of people.
For people in general.
Yeah, I
totally.
Agree with you.
But I think that like if you erase the idea of abnormal reaction, right? And there are people that need to be abstinent because they have whatever this thing is.
Yes, which I agree of abnormal reaction. So we agree on that.
Right.
Piece of it.
So the piece is that like
I don't think it's static.
Okay,
You're saying it's static for everybody in that category for the rest of their lives. And I'm saying I don't think that.
That's like a characteristic of that specific thing, though.
Yeah.
You
so
know
I disagree
mean?
with that portion of the definition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I think but again, for me, it's so not relevant because it's such a small bit of the population.
Right.
But it's real. But for me, it's a real phenomenon. I would refuse to tell the person who drank for 40 years a gallon of alcohol every day, that lost their teeth, that now could have a beer. Well, I guess you weren't a real alcoholic, because that just seems insane to me. Because then the only linchpin of the definition was the fact that he can now have a beer. Like that is how it's defined. Which I get it, but then
totally.
To me,
that's
it's
all
a
it is,
circular
though.
definition.
How so?
It could never be disconfirmed then.
What do you mean?
Meaning there is nothing that could happen that could disconfirm that definition of it. And so that means it's foolproof. Well, no, that means and I just don't, that's not how I think reality is. Meaning, yes, by that definition, anybody who ever breaks the pattern isn't it. So therefore it can never be disconfirmed. Therefore there's no argument because it can never be disconfirmed. So you're right, but I think there's evidence to the contrary.
Okay.
And I guess I just wonder, for instance, if you, who think you're a real alcoholic or a real addict, if you were able to have a beer, I'm not saying you should, but if you were able to have a beer, would you go, I guess I'm not a real alcoholic then?
I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I have no desire for
No, I know. But if you were, right, by your definition, you would go, oh, this whole time I thought I was a real alcoholic, but I wasn't.
Yeah, totally. I'd be like, oh,
and that
shit.
would probably, and my guess is it would actually change your definition of real alcoholic. It wouldn't change your opinion on whether you were one or not, because you've put a stake in the ground that you're an alcoholic and an addict.
It would change my opinion on it.
Really? You'd go, I wasn't a real one?
Yeah, totally. I'd be like, I wasn't really an addict.
That's wild.
I would say it was circumstance. I would say it was trauma. I would say it was, me and my mom trying to kill ourselves together. It would say like a bunch of different stuff. I would say it was youth. And that's the thing, like when I was around...
So can we slow down here a minute?
Yeah, okay, cool.
Because I'm hearing kind of what you're saying about how you think about reality, which is like, this is, right? It's kind of what we were talking about. Like, this is the truth, right? And so, and I agree with you about that. And so for me, this is the truth is alive. It's not static.
Right.
And so I think where I hesitate with what you're doing is that you're prioritizing a definition, potentially, over what is, right? You're like, well, no, there's this definition thing. And I'm like, well, yeah, and I get it. And that's pointing to something that's true enough. but it's not the living truth of what I've experienced, right?
But I'm not like talking about my experience.
No, I know, but you are talking about a definition of alcoholism and abnormality
Right,
that's somewhat
based on
static, and you're basically telling me there's nothing that could happen in reality that would ever disprove this.
I'm not saying that
definition.
there's not an exception to that. I'm sure that there is.
Okay.
I'm just saying that exists.
Well, that part I agree with,
Yeah.
right? There are exceptions. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think there are exceptions to that definition.
I'm saying that like alcoholism and addiction, as defined by the Big Book, exists.
I agree. We agree on that part.
No, in terms
Yeah.
of like
Yeah.
the full scope of it, though, where it talks about, okay, cool, not only is this thing that defines an alcoholic or an addict this abnormal reaction to drugs and alcohol, but it has never by any treatment been fully eradicated, which means that the
Yeah.
only requirement is abstinence. I think that
Got
does
it.
exist.
But are there potential exceptions in that or not? Because I thought I heard you go, there are exceptions to that. Which
Yeah.
then I agree. So
There's potential exceptions, yeah,
that's
for
all
sure.
I'm saying. So
Absolutely.
So then we agree. That's the only point I'm saying. And
Totally.
I'm arguing that those exceptions are actually shockingly limited to me.
Totally.
Right.
Well, I think that also alcoholics and addicts are much smaller group of people than
Then is presented in the
totally.
idea of it.
But I think the problem is that like people have been defining alcoholism and addiction based off like consequences, thinking, tendencies, behaviors,
Yeah.
as opposed to just looking at the simplicity of like, oh no, it's just abnormal reaction.
Yeah.
And because all those thoughts, feelings, behaviors, tendencies, whatever, are just part of the human condition,
Yeah.
and the consequences could happen to anybody.
Yeah.
Like anyone can get a fucking DUI. Like that's not a measure of who is an alcoholic or addict.
I agree.
So because that's what's being proposed out in 12-step meetings, there's a lot of people there that do not need to be there because their definition of alcoholism is not what alcoholism is.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. I
Now, those people who are there
mhm.
in this sort of like muddied water definition of alcoholism are not really people with abnormal reaction.
Yeah.
Those are definitely people who can do
Yeah.
ayahuasca or do this or that, whatever,
Yeah.
smoke some weed.
Yeah.
And the problem is that there are some people who need to be there and who need to remain abstinent because they have the defining, like the definition of
Yeah.
alcoholism versus
Yeah.
the book.
So, yeah, and we disagree on it. I mean, I guess when I really hear that, I think we disagree on it. I don't think about abnormal reaction as such. I think as defined as the way you think about it, and so I think about like patterns in life, and I think about intergenerational patterns. And so I think about like intergenerational patterns and intergenerational patterns of addiction or alcoholism that maybe have a genetic or epigenetic component. I don't know. And I think they can be incredibly strong. I think they can wipe out whole lineages. But I don't think about them as fixed. I think about them as alive. And so because they're alive, I don't think about them as totally static. And I think about them a little bit more in a spectrum way. Like I think it's a living pattern. And so I don't think about it as like, well, here's the definition. And either you fit in the definition or you don't fit in the definition. And if you don't fit in the definition, this is what you should do. And if you do fit in I don't think about it that way.
Well, in terms of what you should do, it's just either you need abstinence and maintain abstinence for the rest of your life, or you don't. That's all.
I don't think about it that way. I do think that there are people that would benefit from abstinence, 100%.
I mean,
Lots of people.
I think that everybody could benefit from abstinence. I don't think abstinence ever killed anybody.
I don't think everybody could benefit from abstinence. I think that some people are better off doing a dose of MDMA in a certain way, or psilocybin in a certain way, or microdosing. I mean, this is going to bring us back into conversation we've already had.
I love it though.
For their overall well-being and the well-being of the world.
You don't think that they can find that through another practice that has nothing to do with an external?
Some people could. Yeah, I think some people could and some people can't. No, I think some people.
So
some
you
people
think
would
that-
suffer for a very long period of time, unnecessarily, when they actually could find benefit. Or we already agreed on this, though.
Right.
So in some sense, you already said, yeah, I think some people could benefit from in the beginning and then find practice. Right? Like there's a timing thing here too that's interesting. Like if somebody was kind of lost for whatever reason in their own narcissistic way for 15 years, and they could have been helped by something else, that doesn't bother me at all. You know what I mean? I don't have an ideology around it. Are there risks involved? Yeah. If it's a personal conversation, we need to have it. You know what I mean?
Right. So when I say that I think that everyone can benefit from abstinence, I'm talking about like the long term. I don't think that anybody needs to use anything. I think
Yeah.
that everybody is equally powerful. I don't think that anyone is any more, incapable of feeling that own power, to experience that empowerment
That's a
than
really
anybody else.
interesting question.
I think we're all cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, I don't think I'm sure about that. I don't think I'm sure about that. I think I'd have to think about that a lot. I mean, there's, from one perspective, I probably would agree with that like, there's a certain, like from a spiritual perspective.
That's the only perspective
Right.
that I really...
Yes, but it's not the perspective that I always utilize when I'm attempting to understand what's going on with somebody, because I think sometimes that's not the spiritual thing to do.
How so?
I think there is elements of randomness that exist in reality, that when they go unacknowledged or somebody projects a certain level of symmetry or meaning onto them, and then behaves accordingly, that they're fucking up.
Okay.
Fragmentation in psychosis would be an example for me, like trying to go, oh, this must be a meaningful experience. And you want to jump off the building and you think that's good. I'm like, no, that person is psychotic. They're fragmented. They actually need somebody else to step in, pull them off the top, you know what I mean? And so are they equal to the person next to them in the moment? No, one person is sane and one person is fragmented. Now, might there be a perspective from another dimension with God or something like that where he's supposed, maybe, but I don't make my decisions from that place. I pull the guy off the building. You know what I mean?
Okay. I don't know if I do that or not.
You don't know if you pull the guy off the building?
I'm not sure.
What if it was your wife?
My wife's not
She
in
would
that
never
state.
do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's hard to imagine that.
Got it. But you could imagine a reality where you would pull the guy off the building.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I feel pretty confident about that 9 times out of 10. And if they're pissed at me and go, I was supposed to die at that moment, I go, you can die tomorrow.
I mean, again, that goes down to what we talked about earlier about our concept of death. If death is a thing that's beautiful, then why pull a guy off the building?
Because they're alive. They're not dead yet.
So
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I actually think that principle of life has an intrinsic value to it, is one I live by. And so because I believe in an intrinsic value to life, and I also do believe in mental illness,
right.
that I would step in and do something about it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of people that essentially put me in the same position where it's like they want to go back out, which is essentially
Yeah.
jumping off a building.
Yeah.
And I just say, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a limit for me. I work with clients who are suicidal,
Mm-hmm.
and I work with them to try to help them move from a place of being suicidal to not being suicidal. And there are points where I go, hey, like I just wanted to make sure that you had opportunity to see things a different way, but like in the end, if you want to leave treatment for the 3rd time, or you want to, you want to go out, like, hey, I got it.
Totally.
But I think also, like, listen, we've raised kids, we have kids. It's clear to me that the developmental apparatus of the child is not the same as the 35-year-old.
Right.
And so there are choices that we make as parents for our children because they're not developed enough. And so I would just also say that there are grown-ups who aren't developed enough or in a state that's more like a child, and they might need an authority to step in. It's risky. I'm not saying like I want to be controlling everybody, but when
Yeah.
I'm confident about that, I can step in and go, hey, man, you're thinking like a child, and I want to give you an opportunity to think like an adult. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess I just don't do that anymore.
And I'm probably very peaceful because I'm stepping in with people all the time and
Yeah.
doing that shit. But I guess that's another thing that's interesting. And I was thinking about this in distinction, I think, to feeling peace as a goal. And this is a real tension in me. On the one hand, I really want to feel peace.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, I think I sort of I wonder about measuring the quality of life by the quality of somebody's problems.
Okay.
Right? Like sort of the greater the problems you're wrestling with, which I think we do have it creates a certain amount of stress, right? When you're carrying more problems, you're carrying more stress, I think, generally. And so I think there's sometimes, and I'm not saying this about you, I think you fucking are busting your ass working with people to get sober in a way that works over time for you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a misconception sometimes people have about spirituality, that they want to experience a life where they're not stressed out about problems. I want to be able to manage my stress, but I want to have my life full of very important problems. You know what I mean?
Okay. Well, that's the life that you're probably going to have then.
It's the life I do have.
Yeah, totally. So
It's
then,
the life that I do have. So I shouldn't complain when I'm stressed out.
no, definitely not. Yeah, I don't really perceive problems.
Oh, yeah.
I don't really see it like that.
Yeah.
And therefore I don't really have any stress.
Fuck, that's great, man.
I mean, it's accessible to everybody, but again, it's a choice belief.
Yeah.
You know, the only time that I put myself in a position to have problems is when I'm seeking for self. But if I'm just trying to be helpful and I don't have any expectation of reciprocation, because I understand the universe is taking care of me as a whole, which means that I'm not dependent upon anybody or anything.
Well, for sure.
Then there's no problems.
But we're always, to me, there are always problems.
Like what?
I'll give an example.
Okay.
Whenever we go to make a choice,
Right?
there's a trade-off inherent in each choice we make. And so when I'm choosing, I could be choosing to participate in suffering at any given moment and causing suffering. And in fact, it's impossible for me to avoid that. And that's a problem for me.
That's not a choice, though. Choice is two or more reasonable options. Is it reasonable to pick suffering?
Well, let's put it this way.
Okay.
You and I are wearing clothes.
Yeah.
We had a choice about how much time and energy
We
were
did.
going to put into what?
We did have a choice.
About how much time and energy we're going to put into the type of clothes we were going to buy.
Right.
We could have put a tremendous amount of energy into it and try to find a factory-free, homemade, supportive, organic, blah, blah, so
Yeah.
that we weren't supporting suffering.
Right.
Because there's a competing claim on our time, energy, and thought, both of us chose, I'm guessing, to shop regular. And in that, we chose to participate in a system of suffering because of our own laziness, or whatever one would like to call it. And for me, that's a problem, right?
Okay.
And so I would hope to get to the point one day where I'm more conscious and I'm prioritizing what I choose to buy or wear more so than, whatever else I chose to spend time with, a carne asada burrito and French fries, obsessing over it, right? And so for me, that's a problem. I acknowledge it. I'd like to be more conscious about it. Or I could give 1,000 examples, but for me, those are all problems where our choices could be participating or contributing to suffering, or they could be alleviating sufferings, in some ways. And that just sucks, but it's life, what are you going to do? And hopefully it's all good in the end and God's going to, take care of it. But until then, I have to be responsible for my choices, and there are problems in them.
Yeah. I mean, I think the nature of life is we sustain ourselves by murder. So
It's problematic in some sense.
that's just what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah.
You know?
But I call those things that contribute towards suffering or potentially contribute towards suffering problems, and I find them unavoidable.
Yeah. Okay. I don't see it like that.
Why not?
I just don't. Again, I think that I'm just tapped into what's in front of me, and I'm not thinking about any of that shit. Because to me, it's like a waste of time. It's never ending,
It's never ending, but it's also the thing that allows us to raise our consciousness, right? Because there were things you weren't thinking about before that you now think about, that allowed you to come to a state that you now appreciate, that you go, I wish I had done that 9.5 years or whatever, 20 years ago. And so that consciousness raising, which has happened to you or you experience in some sense, does matter to you, actually.
I want to be helpful to whatever's in front of me.
You have a value, you have a goal. If you have a value and you have a goal, then you have a value hierarchy, and you're working towards the higher end of your value hierarchy of what you think is important and what you not. You think helping is important, for instance.
That's it.
Well, you like your wife too. You told me you really care about your wife. And
Yeah, but if I'm not
you have other things you value other than just helping, for sure.
Totally. But if I'm not being helpful to my wife, then what am I being?
You value helping, but you value other things as well. You value eating. You value driving your motorcycle as opposed to a car. You have things you value. We all do.
But also, I know that none of that shit matters, though.
Well, I understand, but
Yeah.
you still value them, whether they matter or not. Meaning
Okay.
their preferences for you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, their preferences. Yeah, I guess I don't care.
Well, that's a different question. You do care. You care about helping. You care about lots of things.
Yeah, I care about
You care about lots of things. Of course, you care about music. You're a DJ.
I
like music?
I actually let that go.
You don't like music?
Music's
you don't care
cool.
about music?
No, I enjoy music.
That's what I'm saying. You care
Yeah,
about
yeah.
it. I like music. You would prefer to be in a world with music?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, me too. You care about it. I
Yeah,
do too.
it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I fucking love it. It's more than okay for me. I think music it's very close to the top of my value hierarchy.
I enjoy music a lot.
It's a big fucking deal for
I'll
me.
probably start making music again.
Yeah. We should
Yeah.
do something. We should do something, bro.
Yeah, totally. I will.
Yeah.
I love you, dude.
I love you too, man.
Yeah, this was fun.
We did it.
Yeah. Imagine that.
I thought so.
And it wasn't that crazy.
I didn't think it was going to be crazy.
No. Jordan thought it was going to be crazy. He was nervous about it.
And I hope that, I guess we should say this. Well, I want to say a couple of things because I'm advocating for something new, right, in some sense. So I want to be mindful. I want to make it super clear
Okay.
that I think psychedelics for many people in recovery will be very problematic and can create significant risks for people.
When you say recovery, what do you mean? Because recovery is a broad word right now.
I could even speak in general.
Okay.
I think psychedelics
In general.
have a certain set of risks that one should be well aware of, and that one shouldn't make the choice to utilize something as powerful as psychedelics, certain psychedelics, and there's a range of psychedelics and what that means.
Right.
It's not a cup of coffee.
Totally.
It's not French fries. It's not a walk in the park.
Right.
So I think it is an incredibly potent phenomenon. And that one should have some reverence, respect, and serious guidance about it. So I want to say that out loud. And I think that's like super important. I'm not here saying people should like, hey, do whatever you want. Now, there's a lot of things I think that people should be doing that I could put warning labels on.
Totally.
You know, be careful about getting married when you've only known somebody for X amount. I think that people should be careful. You're right. I mean, I could put that label on a lot of human behaviors.
100%.
That I think are important decisions. But because we're speaking about psychedelics and because I have a love for what I'll call the broader recovery community, and I consider myself a person in recovery, although not abstinence in the traditional ways
That's
as
cool.
defined. I think it's really important that people are thoughtful and really important that people seek guidance. I can be a person for people that are local or curious to seek guidance from. I do that. And I'm also an advocate for abstinence-based recovery.
Totally.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think that psychedelics definitely have their place. I think that what I really support though is not solely placing psychedelics as like the solution.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be integrated.
100%. It is not the solution at
No.
all, by the way. That is so important to say out loud. It is
Yeah.
not. And I think anybody that knows what the fuck they're talking about will say out loud, this is not the solution.
Right.
And I'll agree with you that in most people, the possibilities of psychedelics are just the possibilities of what it means to be human.
Totally.
And that's important to know.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I also think that like there needs to be a space for people who need to be abstinent.
Agreed.
And that's it. And I think that there are some people in this world who just no matter how healed they get spiritually or mentally or whatever, their reaction to drugs and alcohol is going to be problematic.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in healed. So.
I mean, that's the other thing. It's like people, that's what people say though.
I'm running for the person that tells me they're healed. I mean, I prefer the person that tells me they're rich.
That's the problem though. Like that's like the tagline, dude. It's like,
I think that's fucking crazy. That ain't
I'm
my fucking
healed now.
homies. That ain't my fucking
Bro.
group. I'm not hanging out with anybody.
Dude.
There's not a single person I'm hanging out with that's telling me they're healed.
I'm healed enough now so I can do ayahuasca. I'm like, bro, what does that even mean?
I don't even think about it that way.
Yeah,
I mean,
that shit's...
I think that's a very interesting way of thinking about reality in general.
I think it's crazy.
But people think in interesting ways, man.
True.
I have a good mentor. His name is Rabbi Finley, who I love him, but he says, most of human problems come from people not thinking well. He's very cognitive.
I mean, that's true, though.
He's not totally wrong.
Yeah, 100%.
He's not totally wrong.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right on, bro. God bless you, man.
I love you,
It's
dude.
good to see you.
Yeah,
Send my
thank
love
you.
to your lady, man.
I will for sure. I hope she gets to talk to you sometime.
I would love to. Well, hope she can watch this and then we can do a different conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Do it. All right.
All right.